Well, in fact, it's the previous speakers who have talked about bringing things into real life. I am talking more about some support to do that, but the important thing has already been said. You can get to sleep and don't worry. You're not going to miss the most important thing. So yes, we are going to talk about the several things. First, a brief introduction of what we mean by the implementation strategy, but the implementation strategy in Chrodis Plus. Closer, okay, fine. And then just a brief overview of what we have been working on during the last few years to try to support the implementation of those good practices and tools within the different pilot sites in the joint action. So first of all, the idea of the methodology was considered by the people proposing the joint action as something needed to make sure that we could achieve the goals of the PES action. So it's just a guide to facilitate the uptake of those good practices, tools within the pilot sites that wanted to enjoy. And the most important thing of here is that all the methodology is based on collaboration between the different members, stakeholders on the whole joint action, but mainly in the local teams working on the transfer and scaling up of those good practices in each of the pilot sites. And the other main message I want to give is that it's a structured methodology. It's based on sound literature and academic work, but most importantly, it's a flexible one that has to be adapted to the context, the local circumstances, each of the good practices that we want to do. So the main message is structured, but flexible and adaptable. At the end of the day, we organize the methodology in three phases: the pre-implementation one, the implementation, and the post-implementation. And the pre-implementation is, I would say, a key part of the process. And I'm going to talk a little bit about it. In fact, we organize it in two big models, Model 1, Model 2, and that's what I'm going to describe now. The work on this methodology has not been a top-down application of something previously published by anybody, neither Chronicuni or whatever. It has been a development process based on some previous work that started at the end of 2017. Then we had in Italy a workshop presenting the partners the methodology. There was some feedback there, and some final methodology was proposed on May. We had a first webinar, then end of May, and we work on the Model 2, the implementation and the post-implementation methods during the summer 2018. We proposed it in October, and then we had a final webinar on February this year. But I must say that there has been continuous feedback and improvements in the methodology thanks to the proposals of the local working groups, the work package leaders, the project coordinators, Antonio, Rocas, Laimis, and also Milka. Everybody has participated in the final proposal that I am presenting here. But, as I said before, the most important part on all this methodology are the local implementation working groups. And this is not just making it nice for the people working here, the partners, the pilot sites, is the key message. The way these groups are formed is the key to success or failure of the whole methodology. We need here a multidisciplinary groups. We need, of course, those frontline stakeholders, the ones that are working on the different issues related to the good practice. We need people who are experienced on implementation, that know how to manage things, but we need also to involve the decision makers in the regions, organizations, and so on and so forth. Of course, we need somebody that takes care of the logistics, on the organization of all the process, and we need the support of experts, work package leaders, and as Andrew said before, people who also provide some knowledge to make sure that the process goes smoothly and progress adequately. So, related to the pre-implementation, all of these phases we consider to be very important. The first one is to decide what is going to be the scope of the implementation itself in each of the pilot sites. We are not talking about transferring a full defined practice to one place to another. Each of the pilot sites needs specific things, have specific issues to solve, and this is a very important part, and I would say the most important part of all the implementation strategy, to define what is exactly the problem in the pilot site that wants to be challenged, what is the general purpose that we want to achieve with the introduction of that good practice that we found somewhere else. We want to define the target population in our locality, and of course, we want to analyze that example, that good practice that has been shown to us and that we found interesting to solve our problems. And then we have to identify what are the central features of that good practice that really are of interest to us. So once we have all this, then we decide what is the topic of that good practice or of the tool, what aspects of the tool are the ones that we are going to work on it. We are not talking about, as I said before, transferring everything to one place to another. That's never feasible. The second part of this pre-implementation phase is the situation analysis. We want to define what will be the priorities and identify the improvement areas that we're going to work on. Again, all of these things are different from one place to another, depending on different factors. And with what classical SWOT analysis, we want to identify what are we good at, what are our weaknesses, what opportunities we have, and of course, what are the threats. And with all this analysis, we want to identify then what will be our priorities and identify the improvement areas in which we are going to work. And of course, all this will depend on the resources we have, the motivation, the people we have been able to involve in our practice. All those circumstances will lead us to different improvement areas. So there is not a perfect solution to each of us. It has to be contextualized. For that, we propose in the methodology to use the Sirocco maturity model, which is a tool that was developed in a European-funded project, and the Sirocco project. I must say that I don't think many of the pilot sites use it because it's too complicated, and there was not really time to use it in time framework of Chrodis Plus, but it's there on the methodology. But all this pre-implementation phase ends in a concrete action plan. The action plan is really the guide for the implementation. And according to those improvement areas we identified in the SWOT analysis, we have to define achievable objectives. We have to define concrete actions to achieve those objectives. And of course, we have to define those indicators that can help us to monitor whether we are progressing in an adequate way. And those three components, the objectives, the activities, the change package, and the indicators conforms the pilot action plan. So this is a brief scheme of the pre-implementation that, in fact, has been done through a process of discussion, collaboration, locally by the local implementation working group. And in fact, this is the baseline phase for all the implementation methodology. Going back to the second phase, the implementation phase, what we want really then is, based on this previous work, to transfer those practices into practices and tools into real life. And again, it's the local implementation working groups who are doing that, who have done that Chrodis Plus. They have specified and carried out the implementation activities, they have collected information, and they have analyzed that information to try to improve that. And the methodology that we propose is based on the PDSA cycle, the plan, or the plan phase, in which all those actions defined in the change package have to be specified, make concrete, and decide who is going to do what aspects of those activities, and how are we going to do that, when, where, and so on and so forth. Then they have to be carried out and collected the data, and then analyze the results compared to what we were planning to do, and corrections have to be drawn and decided. In Chrodis Plus, we had a very limited timeline. So not all the pilot sites have been able to do more than one cycle. In fact, many of you have only done one cycle of this PDSA. Others have been able to do more than one. That's up to, again, to the local circumstances. One of the other messages that we want to say today is that this is not a managerial process. The joint action is something that is supposed to help not only the pilot sites that are involved here, but all member states, all the European Union. So we have given very much importance to the reporting and to the way that we are acquiring the knowledge that we are getting, but also disseminating. This morning, we devoted some time to the dissemination activities and the assessment activities, and that's something that we have given very much importance in the post-implementation phase that we will enter in some time. The post-implementation phase, as its name says, is after the implementation, and there's two main actions to do here. One is the assessment of all the process. We want to learn from this joint action, and we want to report what we have learned to others so that they can do it better next time. We want to learn about the overall impact of our actions in each of the pilot sites, whether implementing those good practices or tools have been of any use, have been worthwhile. But we also want to learn of the implementation process, not only the final results. We want to learn from the experience. And for that, the methodology that we use uses the Consolidated Framework for Implementation Research, the SAFIR, which is a structured way of approaching the implementation process that I'm not going to enter on all the description. It's on the methodology. It's available for all of you. But it tries to go in a systematic way on 5 different dimensions of the implementation process and try to assess several issues within those of the dimensions. But again, the methodology does not oblige the local implementation working groups to go through all of them. Local groups select which of those aspects are more relevant in their experience, and they analyze only those ones that they consider to be interesting. Finally, all of this experience in Chrodis Plus will be reported, again, using an established framework, the Squared 2.0, sorry. But again, we have simplified it a little bit. It's a version, this version contains 18 items that respond to 4 key questions. Why did you start this endeavor? What did you do? What did you find? And what does it mean? And of course, the first 9 items have been answered with the pre-implementation phase. So it's not that after the end of the implementation, people have to start to think about all those things. This process of reporting goes in parallel from the very beginning of all the implementation process, and the remaining items are fed during the implementation and the post-implementation phases. So it's something that goes in parallel with all the process. Local implementation working groups are not only managers, are not only practitioners, they are action researchers, and they want to report. So this is the final conclusions of this strategy. Again, all is based on the collaborative methodology and documenting this process. This methodology adapts to different contexts and supports different kind of good practices and tools implementation. And learning requires assessment, evaluation, but also structure reporting. And we hope that when the evaluation that Work Package 3, Elisa, Manu are carrying out comes to evaluate it, we hope that all this methodology shows to be useful. We don't know. It's the idea for the whole process. So thank you very much for your attention.